Welcome everybody. This is a public meeting on the official plan and development bylaw, that a process that has been ongoing now for 3 or 4 years. I would like to welcome everybody. We have some members from the public here. We have members from council here. We have members from FOTEN here, and we have a rural development officer here, and I'll be introducing them more as we get closer to it. However, this is an opportunity for the public and council to give some additional remarks. Over the course of the few years that we've been doing this, FOTEN has done significant work in getting input from the members of the public and the businesses in the rural municipality of Belfast area. They've spoke to a number of groups in the area, and they've also done some public meetings and spoken to council. They originally came out with a draft in early 2022. And then after our public meeting, there was, actually it might have been 2021 that we had that meeting. After they had heard from council and members of the public, we created a matrix with all the changes and or questions that people had. Matt and Jamie of FOTEN went back and added comments where they could, and gave reasons why they couldn't in other cases, and that resulted in another draft which came out in October 2022. At that time, the province then stated that they were going to put a hold on the requirement of any municipality having to do a official plan and development bylaw. But rather than scrapping it at that time, we decided to put a hold on the work, because the new council that came in a couple months after that said they wanted to be able to hear from the public, and they wanted to provide their own comments on the draft that was up on the website. The new drafts were put on our website basically a couple of years ago, and we started reminding everybody a few months ago that they should take a look at the October draft, and they would have another opportunity today to make some additional comments. So that's what we're here. What's going to happen today, we will hear the members of FOTEN will make some remarks for people to hear about the documents that have been up on our website. We will also hear from a rural development officer who took a look at the drafts with a rural lens, and then we will open the floor to the public for any comments. The comments can be specific to the document itself, or the comments can be just about official plans in general, whatever they wish to do. I have to tell you though that this meeting is scheduled from 1 to 3 p.m. and we cannot go any longer than 3 p.m. because there's another event that's going to happen after that. However, because we have smaller numbers here today than we expected, that should not be a problem. So having said that, I will now introduce FOTEN Planning Inc. The officers that were working on this is Matt McElliott and Jamie Posen, and they are both planners. They are from Ontario, and maybe I'll just leave it to Matt and Jamie to make their own introductions, and we can hear from them now. You good to go, Matt?
Yep.
Okay.
Everyone can hear me okay?
Yes, and we have a microphone next to this phone. And oh, my apologies. We wanted to try and do a a Zoom call for this meeting. However, as you know, the Wi-Fi system in rural PEI is not always very good. So we were not able to get the Zoom signal, but we are able to get the cell signal. So with that, take it away, Matt.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Bob, for the introduction, and hello everyone. It's very nice for you to have taken, I guess, time out of your weekend to attend this public meeting for the official plan and the development bylaw. As Bob had mentioned, and as you'll recall, this is the project that started a few years ago, and obviously culminated into a draft of the official plan and the development bylaw, in which we actually presented to the public just under 2 years ago in September of 2022. You'll probably remember that period of time because shortly thereafter, Hurricane Fiona came to your municipality and to the island. I guess shortly thereafter, as Bob had mentioned, we prepared a bit of a matrix that's on the rural municipalities website that responds to the comments that we heard we did respond to the comments during the meeting. Of course, we had a very healthy discussion, but of course we had written correspondence, written responses to comments that were provided verbally or provided to us in written form, and that is still on the municipality's website. So I would invite you to have a look at that document to understand what some of the changes were. And not in every instance we made changes necessarily to the documents, but we evaluated each of the comments and made adjustments to both documents as required. I guess at that, and understanding that, again, this is another public meeting, and we're here to answer any questions on those documents. Perhaps I'll leave it at that. I apologize, and I'll let Jamie speak, but I think maybe the last thing I'll say is I apologize for not being there in person. That would have been fantastic for us to have been there in person. But nonetheless, hopefully this is still an effective way to receive additional feedback and hear from the good fine folks of the rural municipality of Belfast. So I'll hand it over to Jamie to add anything he'd like, and yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Before Jamie talks, could you give a short synopsis of who the two of you are and the company you work for?
Yes, absolutely. I can do that. So Jamie here. Hi, everybody. I'm a planner with Potain Consultants. Based in Ottawa. We also have a couple of other offices in Kingston and Toronto, and we're a full-service planning, urban design, and landscape architecture firm, and we do work all over Canada. So on PEI itself, actually, we've had over time 4 projects preparing official plans and development bylaws just like this one. And this is partly in response to the province starting to mandate that municipalities have plans such as this. This is relatively new to many parts of the island, but I can assure everyone that it's certainly not new to other provinces across Canada, where pretty much every province mandates that municipalities have a plan such as this, and usually implementing zoning to go with it. So this is really not unusual. So we're very familiar with the processes and preparing documents like this. So it's really been a privilege for us to work with Belfast and to work with other communities on the island as they kind of embark on this new approach and strategy, because we think it is really a valuable tool to control land use and development in the community. So very happy to be here, and we're really grateful to, as Matt said, everyone who's come out today to be part of this meeting, but also over the course of the project, members of council, members of the community, and particularly staff have been really helpful in helping to shepherd this project along. So I guess with that, maybe I'll turn it back to you, Bob. We're here to answer any questions if there are any. Otherwise, we're looking forward to putting a bow on this project, because it's been certainly a long journey, but we're happy that we've arrived at the end now.
Thank you very much, Jamie and Matt. So before we go to public comments and council comments, I wanted to introduce Mr. John Ployer. He's a rural development officer, actually a development officer for Eastern Kings. I'll let John introduce himself in a moment. However, the rural municipality of Belfast, in addition to the draft documents of the official plan and development bylaw, we wanted to have a rural development officer from PEI in particular taking a look at the two documents to make sure it had, or that it was being looked at in a rural lens, because oftentimes when you do these templates for an official plan or development bylaw, oftentimes it might be similar to an urban place or a mix of urban and rural. And so because ours is the rural municipality of Belfast, we wanted to make sure that we had a development officer look at it with a rural lens. So for that reason, we contracted Mr. John Ployer to do exactly that and come up with some opinions and recommendations for council on the documents before John. So without further delay, I'll pass it over to John Ployer, Rural Development Officer out of the Eastern Kings.
Perfect, thank you. Can everyone hear me well? Okay. So thank you, Bob, and thank you everyone for coming today. As said, my name is John Ployer. I'm the Rural Development Officer for the Rural Municipality of Eastern Kings. If you're not familiar with where that is, it is past Surrey, towards the other tip of the island there on the east. So the reason why I was brought in, as Bob says, that I'm a Rural Development Officer for a municipality that has a similar profile to Belfast. And in what ways do I mean that? It's a very large area. It has no central services. It's essentially entirely rural, and it has a very similar economic and social profile to Belfast, with a lot of fishing, a lot of coasts, large seasonal cohort. We have a significantly smaller population to Belfast, actually, about 600 full-time residents, and a large cohort of seasonal residents. But besides the population difference, there's a lot of good comparisons. And perhaps most importantly to this, we've had planning authority as well as an official plan and bylaw for over 20 years now. So we've been through this process, and we've been running under the provincial, at the time we started this was a requirement, but it's optional at the moment. But our municipality finished this process a long time ago and has been operating pretty uncontroversially under it. So I was asked by Bob to provide a report based on the drafts of the official plan and bylaws that Boton produced. And again, from a rural perspective or from a PEI perspective, and much like what's going to be happening today, my feedback of the reports are the sole opinion of my own. And many of the points or recommendations I bring up in my report, which I believe everyone has a copy of, could have multiple different solutions, and it rests with council and with this community to decide what they want to do with both Boton's report and my own. The review of the official plan and bylaws was done with the following criteria: to review the documents to ensure mutual consistency and compatibility, to compare the documents with all relevant legislation to ensure compliance, to identify any areas of the documents which may not align with Belfast as a rural municipality, and to identify any areas which may cause undue difficulty for municipal staff and for future applicants under subdivisions or development of any kind. If you were to complete the process of getting planning authority, getting an official plan of bylaws, you would have someone such as myself operating under that, under the same criteria that I do under the Municipal Government Act. So while I can take questions about my report, and Foden's going to take questions about theirs, if you have any specific questions about how having planning authority works for a municipality, I may be able to assist you just from someone who is involved with that already. I reviewed this report using all relevant legislation as well as 3 rural municipalities, Eastern Kings, West River, and Milton Vale Park, and 1 town, Town of 3 Rivers. And just to summarize my conclusions, I won't be going through this report at any length right now, but if anyone has any questions from it, I'll certainly take them. To summarize, these documents are fairly in line with what you would expect from other municipalities in terms of structure and in terms of what's inside them. And I also should add, I reviewed the matrix that Foden was just speaking about from previous public feedback, and I reviewed that against what they produced, and I was satisfied with the changes that they made. So to answer your first question there, yes, these documents are fairly similar to what you would expect from other municipalities. The question is whether it is what the terms are inside them are going to be what you want to see in your municipality. My main points, and it's repeated many times in my list of recommendations, which you'll find on the last few pages. In blue, there's a summary of all the recommendations, is that I just want to make sure that the development bylaw, which is under the official plan, is consistent and cohesive. Because if you're going to have something in your official plan, you're going to want to have it regulated in some way in your bylaw. And there were some aspects of the drafts which I just felt should be made more clear, and then from others, the rest of the recommendations for the most part are from my experience as a development officer. It's me saying, you'd want to do it this way, because if you did it a different way, it might cause issues, not just for the municipality, but for applicants themselves. That's pretty much a summary. Those are the 2 kinds of recommendations I made. A lot of it is either, restate this to be more clear within the bylaw or the official plan, or change this to more align with what Belfast probably would want to do as a rural municipality. Some of these are based on my own personal experience. Others are based on looking at the legislation to ensure that they're all sanitary and all such that, but I don't think there's any need to go into any of these recommendations in detail until the questions are asked. But my summary is that this is, as they stand, structurally they're very sound, official plans and bylaws. It's just the details inside that some of them I think should be reviewed, and others are totally up to your opinion as to whether or not they should stay as is. So I believe that's it for my report, Bob, and I know I'll be here at another chair taking any questions from anyone, as Foden and Bob are too.
Thank you very much, John. So there's 2 processes. We're going to hear from the public first, and then after hearing from the public, we will hear from members of council, and then we will wrap it up after that. Now, normally in public presentations, we normally are restricted to 5 minutes. However, because there's only a few folks that have come out for this, you're definitely going to be allotted some more time to make your presentation. I would ask that you come up here to make your presentation where John is sitting down, so that we can pick it up on the mic and also on the camera. And if you could state your name for the record before your presentation, and then fill your boots, make your comments. So I think Sherry and, I'm sorry, I don't know your... Hillary were definitely here first. So if you wanted to come up to the front, Sherry, I know you had comments in relation to the Belfast Area Watershed Group.
Yeah, but there's a lot.
Come on.
I wasn't really prepared to.
Well, why don't you come up here, and then I'll talk about what you sent us.
Okay.
And I have a copy here of what you sent us.
Yes.
We just want to see your face on camera.
I know. Don't look.
Come on up, Sherry.
Don't worry.
Just right here. Okay, so for the record, Sherry Pelkey is the Executive Director of the Belfast Area Watershed Group, and Sherry's group sent us a presentation. It's a five-piece document, and we will, do you know if members of the council have received that?
Yes, I printed off a copy for each of them today.
Oh, they have it, okay, good. You got it there, Sherry. So maybe, Sherry, you can let us know about what your intention in the presentation that you sent us, the five-page document that you sent us.
Well, our intention, well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you. And we do want to thank the council and the public for embarking on this. And we hope that you will take this opportunity to actually implement the official plan and bylaws. And the other big piece for us is that we keep the rural, I guess, landscape and the vibrancy that we have in our community that we're known for. And that's what Bob works for, is for our environment, and it's a common good for everyone. And we just hope that it gets reflected in this plan. So one of the, I guess the big things for us was, we know we don't have big subdivisions left, but this is for future planning also, is to have some type of conservation subdivision policy that will protect and give green space. So that was one of those things. It's a bit, I guess, more detailed than a standard subdivision. And so that was one of the areas that we hoped that you would look at. And we did include some sample bylaw wording from a report that is soon to be released on the Federation of Municipalities, is that how you say it? Website. And so we've included that. And what's the other big thing? Our forest. We actually have, I think it was 51% forest in the municipality, which is probably one of the largest areas on PEI, and that makes us stand out. We would like to see that kept, but we need to have some regulations around those, and hopefully those will also be looked at. And maybe more protected. And I see in some of the comments that came out to add species at risk by law, which is all kind of part and parcel of that for us. Our environment is a system. So if one piece gets taken away, it will impact another piece. Like our riparian zones, for instance, are very important, and asking for an increase in the protection zone for buffer zones is future-proofing ourselves to protect our water, our recreational fisheries, and the recommendation at a larger scale is actually a minimum of, I think, 50% or a 50-meter buffer zone. So asking for a 30 would be better than what we have provincially, and will help us. We know that with climate change, we get more runoff, we get flash floods, and better buffer zones, bigger buffer zones will help protect us and our waterways. So those are some of the, I guess, higher level things.
Okay, so while you're here, Sherry, was there any specific questions that you had from either Fulton or John?
Well, one I think I just talked about was if our official plan goes through and say our buffer zones do get increased, we need a way to enforce that. I'm not sure if that can happen, but I know maybe eventually that can happen.
Yes, one of the requirements of having an official plan and development bylaw is that we also have to be able to enforce it. So that's something that we would have to contract for. Okay?
And just one other thing
Yeah.
on our coastal environment. I know that the province just put out the state of the coast or coastal state of the coast report, where they say they're going to enact all recommendations from the climate school. So I hope we really look at that and maybe enact some of those. Hopefully there'll be more protection. We're talking about retreat from the coast, not building in flood zones, protecting, I guess our wetlands are in some ways already protected. We really need to protect those under climate change and for carbon capture. So a lot of the stuff we do encompasses a lot of different areas. So we just wanted to put our voice out there, and yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Much appreciated.
I have a
Do you
question.
anything to add? Go ahead, Joe.
Sorry. Sherry, as you know, that like when the council started this process, it was something that was being mandated by government, and now it's no longer being mandated. So you can answer just for yourself personally, or if you were to speak for Bob, you would like to see this go ahead, regardless of that it's no longer required.
Yeah, and so speaking on behalf of Bob,
Okay.
we would like to see this enacted. I think it's kind of future proofing what we have here in the municipality. And we have a beautiful environment, natural heritage, residential, agriculture, it all, and we want to see, and this is how we protect it. I mean, you could look at, say, the expansion of Stratford and the things that are happening there and how fast that changed. There's nothing to say that Belfast area may be the next place where they want to start really developing. So I know a lot of people want to protect the way it is right now. This is how we can do that, through official plan and bylaws.
I noticed that climate change is a big issue these days, and it certainly would be on the provincial government's radar. I'm just wondering if the Department of Environment would be the more appropriate group to be looking at some of these additional restrictions that you're talking about. I don't know much about wetland legislation or protection, but I'm quite sure that there's a pretty strong environmental lobby already, which you'd probably be a part of.
Yeah, so there are already regulations in place under the Environmental Act and Fisheries Act, Wildlife Act, there's a lot. In some cases, we can step it up if we were able to enforce it. There are things happening, I guess, behind the scenes, where we're kind of lobbying for more protection. For instance, our wetlands and our water courses will be impacted hugely by climate change with extreme storms and everything. So we would like to see a province-wide increase, but those things take time in protection zones and buffer zones. Some areas have it already, like in Morel, they have a green belt where they have, for instance, a 60-meter buffer zone along the Morel River. And it's proven that it's one of the healthiest riparian zones we have in PEI.
That was put in place by the provincial government, was it not?
Yeah, so it would have started at a community level and just kind of went up, and now it is designated, so. And I believe Surrey area also has some areas also. They're within their plan, but can't be enforced at this point, I think I'm correct on that. I could be wrong now.
The enforcement, it's on different levels of enforcement,
Yeah.
provincial versus municipal.
Yeah.
So, there's just nothing you can do right now to enact anything that Sherry's talking about. And I guess her point is that, regardless of what the province does, there's a lot of things they would like to see happen within Belfast.
Specific for.
Yeah, specific to Belfast, or just in general if the province never gets around to it.
Yeah, it takes a long time.
Yeah.
So I guess just a further question on that. So if we put in, say, 60-meter buffer zones, but the province has 15, are we able to enforce that above
Yes.
the province?
Yeah. It's enforced in two ways. First, at the time when they apply, making sure that things are approved for whatever the bylaw is going to say, or the official plan. And then, for example, at the stage of construction or the stage of subdivision, when they're actually doing it, we have an enforcement mechanism in terms of like an enforcement officer who's going to actually go after them if they're not following it. So it's enforced on a couple different levels municipally to make sure it happens.
I have a question, Sherry. This forestry is 51%. How updated is that figure?
Well, it's not as updated as we would have liked it now. But the definition of forestry,
It's prior Fiona, I
Okay.
assume.
yeah, yes, it is. So even though there's places where all the trees have been taken out, but it's just sitting there, is that still considered or defined as a forest? Because if it's regenerating on its own. So, those things we've asked for clarification before. So at this point, it's still considered a forest. I guess our concern is the ones that are being clear cut for other purposes, and especially if they're in ecologically sensitive zones. They create more fragmentation for wildlife corridors. They're impacting wetlands, things like that. So, but if we were to go out, make up a definition of what forest would be to us, then we've lost a lot to Fiona, not just the stuff that came down because of Fiona, but the aftermath of what's happening now.
Has the province identified the designated wetlands?
Yes, most water courses, wetlands are already mapped and designated. There may be some you run across. We do have some issues with our headwaters that have disappeared, although they've been historically mapped. They're now under a field somewhere. All our streams are fed by headwaters and springs. That's how PEI water courses work. So for us, trying to protect our headwaters and or getting them to work again properly, and clearing stream or our springs and or finding those springs are really important to our waterways. Yeah, pretty much everything has been mapped. You might run across a few things that's not. I just came back from a course on wetland delineation, and if we were to start delineating, which is mapping out some of our forests or our wetlands, there'd be a lot of areas where we probably shouldn't be building or developing. That's side note. That's our environmental case.
Seeing how climate change is on everybody's agenda these days, do you know as the Department of Environment, is the province looking at expanding the protected areas, the boundaries of the riparian zones? Are they already looking at that?
Well, I have to decline that right at the moment, that question. But we're hopeful. Now, the coast is a different story, because there are things being looked at for the coast and coastal development. And that's public information. You just look at the state of the coast report.
Yeah, I think they already have a model in place, don't they, that shows the effects over the years. And I know that in different parts along this, our coastline, that they put in pegs, they surveyed in spots where they're doing an actual measurement of coastline erosion.
Yeah, so we've participated with the Climate Lab in the past with the erosion pins, but now they can step it up more because they have LiDAR and everything. So that's all available to look. You can look online. I think it's Chris. I think it's called Chris. I'm not sure the exact website, but it is called Chris, CHRIS. It can show all the coastal flooding, the impacts coming later for all properties along the coast. So it's pretty eye-opening when you look at that. And as I said, there's lots of information out there that shows the different things that we should be looking at under climate change, from, you know, not just mitigation, but adaptation to climate change along our coast and even our freshwater areas. And and extreme storms and everything, all that impacts all of that, so.
The website's chris.peiclimate.ca.
Yes, yeah, so it's an interactive map. You can look up your own property, you can look up all properties.
Thank you very much, Sherry.
Thank you.
I'm Hillary. I had sent an email this morning, very late, because I was not prepared.
You just happen to have it.
Oh, yeah. Basically, I read over the revised documentation in Mr. Boyer's report, and thank you very much for doing that. That answered a lot of questions, and I also read through the matrix. Thank you to HOTEN for providing it. Just a few things that I still had questions about. I know from the matrix response to my previous questions that a lot of issues that I had were with the yard versus front yard setback and where you were allowed to do things on your property and whatnot. And from the matrix, a lot of it where I was reading yard actually was with it, like excluding the front yard setback. And I do know, like in the bylaw, the actual definition of yard is at the front. So if it could be perhaps clarified a little in any future draft, that you can still say put an accessory building in your front yard as long as you allow for the setbacks and everything like that. Another thing that I had an issue with previously that's gotten better, but I could still have a couple of issues, is with the whole section 3.11 sub 2, with the allowance of the development officer into the property for inspecting the property. I mean, obviously the development officer has to be allowed in the property for inspections, but I do think that the homeowner should be there while they're doing it, both for the protection of the property and the development officer, so that nobody's like, well, he came in and he turned off my furnace and all of my pipes froze kind of situation. And the way that subsection 2 of 3.11 is worded, it's kind of stands alone, basically saying that they can enter anywhere on the property without making it subject to the restrictions and notice requirements of the rest of the paragraph. So it would be, I would prefer if it basically said subject to those requirements. And I know the subsection 6 gives them, the development officer, the ability to enter under an emergency or extraordinary circumstance. I couldn't really think what that would be that would waive the requirement for notice if it's for a development permit. If you're, like, it's not like you're going in because the house is on fire if you're the development officer. Hopefully you would call the fire department. But just that kind of circumstance, it's like, to me, if the development officer is being granted the ability and the power to waive any notice requirements in order to enter any property at any time, then A, it should be the development officer, not anyone he assigns that right to, and B, perhaps define what kind of circumstance requires an emergency or constitutes extraordinary circumstances, just because, like, if it's a matter of public safety or something like that, there's emergency personnel who deal with that. But yeah, those were my two big sticking points that were not addressed in the matrix, or that I continued to be confused by, which is, you know, probably me problem. That, and in the plan itself, the the dangerous, hazardous, and unsightly premises bylaw, you know, like indicating that you shall enact one as opposed to may, making it mandatory as opposed to optional. I know my personal definition of what constitutes a beautiful property is very much not necessarily everybody else's. You might like a manicured lawn, but I like wildflowers, and I know I don't like Stratford, so if it's one of those things where your neighbors get to tell you what your property should look like just because they have a different idea of what they want property to look like, then I don't think that they should be allowed to do that in a rural setting. And yeah, that's basically my main points. I do think that the bylaw is an important tool that we should have at some point, but I appreciate the council taking the time to do it properly and not sort of cause problems in the present or the future kind of situation. Make it delicate balance.
Thanks, Hillary. I'm wondering, Matthew or Jamie, did you want to address Hillary's comments in regards to the clarifying the yard versus setback, and also about development officer being able to go on the property?
Sure, Bob. I'm happy to jump in here. Jamie here. Hillary, thanks for your comments and for your involvement through the process here. I guess I would just add for explain a couple of things happening here. So there was the definition of yard. Admittedly, I was a little bit confused about the final comment just with regards to the definitions, because the definition itself and the search word was, it begins with a Y, so it's the second last definition in the list. Says yard means an area of land adjoining a building, and then it proceeds to define each front yard, rear yard, side yard, flankage yard. So there is that differentiation between yards, but maybe I was misunderstanding what you were saying there. With regards to the accessing the property, I guess the first thing to say is completely agree insofar as if there is an actual emergency, like a fire or something, it's not going to be the development officer accessing the property. It would, of course, be first responders in that case. But I think there are circumstances, albeit very rare circumstances. This is put in the bylaw, but it's not expected to be used, hopefully not even ever. But it is taken directly from the legislation to permit, if there's an unsafe situation that could cause a fire, it's not an active fire at the moment, but it could create a hazard, then that development officer has the ability to rectify the situation. And particularly, if the landowner is not present, I think that's the way you're concerned, because in most cases, the development officer would probably just approach the landowner when they were there at home, and ask them to, fix the situation. The whole problem would go away. But of course, if the landowner's nowhere to be found, or they're on vacation, or whatever the circumstance, there has to be that ability for the protection of public safety. So I'll admit, like, it's probably going to be a rare circumstance, but the issue with these bylaws of enumerating all the possible scenarios that could happen, that you run the risk of boxing yourself in and not accounting for certain situations. So suddenly something pops up and you have to cross-reference your list, and if it's not on the list, you know what I mean? It gets difficult, but at the end of the day, this is just taken directly from the legislation that allows, the province permits municipalities to take action. So it's a reflection of that. And then, with regards to the dangerous, hazardous, and unsightly bylaw, yes, so I guess let's focus on the first two, dangerous and hazardous. Of course, I think most of those things that would be defined in the bylaw would probably be agreed upon, and not very subjective in that case. Sure, unsightly is, a consideration, but in our experience, in rural context such as Belfast, as you're describing, the intention is not to make it look like Stratford, of course. It's more, unsightly has to do more with, if there's, large pieces of equipment or something like that are not suitable for a farm context, or not suitable for the residential context, as the case may be. But even then, like I say, the focus in the bylaw is more on the dangerous and hazardous part. If and when the municipality goes ahead with creating bylaws such as this, there's ample examples from whether it's across the island or elsewhere. This is a very common type of bylaw that municipalities have, including rural ones. And so there would be lots of examples to draw upon to look at how other municipalities use this tool in a way that's not meant to be sort of a punishment for not having a manicured lawn. That's a pretty extreme situation that I don't expect would apply here. But at the end of the day, it's also a community process where everyone can, or the council has the ability to decide what it wants to see in that bylaw, usually based on other examples. I hope that is helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Jamie. I might ask John to give his experience on access, generally how it operates.
Yeah, I'll say a little bit to each of those, but I mean, Foden did address them all. I'll start with the unsightly one because that's where we just ended off. Typically, in my experience, that's more derelict buildings. That's pretty much the only major kind of unsightly.
Which would be dangerous or hazardous.
Yes, exactly. They're all kind of connected in that way. So they're right. In the rural context and in the PEI context, you really don't see that kind of like aesthetic stuff you're talking about. But kind of main point of that is that if this goes forward and then they decide as a municipality we need to create this bylaw, it doesn't just, appear one day. It goes through the normal process of a bylaw where everyone gets to see it first, everyone gets to review it first, and council gets to approve it. So it isn't like it's going to strictly be one thing. It's going to be whatever council decides they want to do with that. So, and then you have even more context to feed into that. You're able to provide more feedback to them. There are a few places in these documents where it says council shall or may create a bylaw to specify that, and I bring that up in my report a couple times. And yeah, you have to be careful with the shalls and mays, so just make sure it's how you want it. As I said on the council meeting, after this is done, there's then the figuring out this other stuff, and that's one of those things. But like, I agree with Foden in that point. You wouldn't really see that concern that you had in that bylaw, unless council wanted to make that a thing, and then I'm sure that would be quite an interesting discussion your municipality would be having.
We're known for that.
Yeah. And then just on 3.11 enforcement, it's kind of, I presume I don't have all the documents in front of me, but I'm sure a lot of that's taken just directly from the either the Planning Act or the Municipal Government Act about how municipalities can enforce things. It's almost like stating your provincially allowed power as a municipality. So it can be reviewed, like what's in here, to like figure out, you know, is that exactly how it should be? Is it exactly what we want? Is there a power that we should give to someone else, basically? All that, those kind of things. So I didn't see it as a major concern, but you are right about your, you know, liberties and such. Is it going to be something that we should be worried about? And
Would it be possible to add something to that paragraph to say that if they deem it an emergency, that the personnel, like say fire or police or whatever, accompany them to the property?
we'd have to look into the legislation and make sure those kind of things are allowed, first of all. Because I just don't know off the top of my head if it is
Just
or
if
not.
it's a safety thing, that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
development officer showing up and being like, this is a safety problem,
Yeah.
doesn't solve the safety problem.
No, for sure.
But,
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right, and thank you, because these are kind of the actual, like, hard-hitting questions we need to kind of figure these documents out. It's more of like a, do you as a municipality agree in concept you want to go forward with this or not? And then if the answer is yes, then you go through it and verify these kind of points. That's kind of how this process would work, you know.
regarding the yard versus setback
Yes.
thing, so the definition of yard is very clear at the beginning, but through the matrix, a lot of the time, the explanation for what can and cannot happen is basically, as long as it's, like, as long as the setback is allowed, then things can be in the front yard. Like, say, if an accessory building in the front yard, as long as you have the setback allowed, that kind of thing. So it's not always clear in the bylaw itself when they're talking about the front yard or the front yard setback. Occasionally, I think it should be a front yard setback that they talk about, but it's just, the word is just yard. So that's part of my confusion.
Yeah, and actually, with the presentation, we had the opportunity to see John's full presentation on Wednesday, and he addressed a number of things about making sure the bylaw and the official plan said the same thing. The bylaw was the vision, and the plan was the vision, and the bylaw was how to do it. So they wanted to make sure they were in sync. He did note that, and he also talked about a number of things that may not have been allowed in some areas, but for a rural municipality, they should be allowed.
Yeah, but yeah, other than that,
Wonderful.
great.
So Hillary, I have the same question for you.
Yep.
Again, this was started because it was becoming a law that we were required to meet. It's no longer a requirement. You, for yourself personally, do you see this as something that you would like to see enacted now, something that could wait, or something that shouldn't be done at all?
I think it should be enacted, but I think it should be done properly with the right focus. Much like Bob, I am strongly in favor of environmental protections, especially our drinking water. I think that we should, like, all of the subdivision stuff, all of the environmental stuff, like, absolutely. It's just the sort of the attention paid to what individuals do on their own property that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because I'm easily rubbed the wrong way about that kind of thing. But yeah, I think even if it's done sort of in a stage by stage format, where parts of it are enacted, like the subdivision part and the development pieces and whatnot. I think it's necessary. I think it's going to become more necessary as time goes on, and I do think it's, as Foten rightfully pointed out in response to a few of my comments, it's zoning is a forward-thinking thing, and you can't do it on a reactionary basis. So absolutely, but I don't think it's going to be a painless process. Sorry, but I think it's a necessary one. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Robert. Did you want to say something, Robert? You always want to say something, Robert. Okay, come on up here. And if you could state your name on the record.
Yep. Hi everyone, my name is Robert Don
Belfast, except for 4 years of my life where I worked with, as a conservation officer with Lands and Forests, Nova Scotia. Farmed, after that I farmed almost all my working career. Was involved with many NGOs, farm organizations, Federation of Agriculture, Data Board, Indian Hort Council. I was also on, I think it was the 80s, I was asked to be involved with the PBI Environmental Advisory Council, and I spent 4 or 5 years with that. So I have some, I think I have some valid, balanced views of some of the things that have been said here today. I'll speak to buffer zones. That's a tough one as a farmer, because there's been a lot of changes in farming practices in the last, I want to say, 30 years. Buffer zones were brought in Act, I forget when, Sherry, you might be able to help me out there, but it was a 15 meter. I remember there was a lot of discussion about it back then, and it was needed in certain cases. But basically, we have a blanket policy now that says we have to be 15 meters back from any water course or wetland, whether it's needed or not. And I get quite concerned as a farmer when people say, well, we need to double this. Well, in certain cases, you may need to double it, but other cases you don't. And that's the problem I have with this broad paintbrush kind of an attitude people seem to take. You have to remember that the person that owns that land bought and paid for it, and they're looking after it to the best of their abilities with regulations. Farms today have changed their cropping practices tremendously since, I want to say, the 70s. Like, if you would have mentioned in the 70s where you got to berm this ground to stop the runoff, they would have laughed at you. But I can go anywhere PEI today where it is a severe issue and there are berms all over the place. Equipment has changed. For those of you who come from the west to east to get here, you'll notice on the way back home there's a farm, the people who bought our farm, they're operating a piece of machinery that instead of going over the ground 3 times to prepare fertilizer and plant, it's a 1-pass machine. That's not a cheap piece of gear. It cost $250,000 8 years ago. Plus the one that pulls it, another $500,000. They're spending that money because they think it's the right thing to do. It does stop runoff. It does stop erosion, and it's a lot more environmentally friendly. So when we're talking about changing buffer zones, we need to think about the things that farmers are doing now that are better than they were 20 years ago. If this council decides to do this and increase buffer zones, I can tell you, you're going to have to consider the rights of the person who owns that ground, and you're going to have to compensate. Ground is cheap. When we started farming, we bought a farm for $100 an acre. My father said I could have bought we bought a field for $100 an acre. He said I could have bought the whole farm for that. Today, ground in this area is worth anywhere between $7,000 and $10,000 an acre. So if you're going to take extra ground away from production, you have to consider that. It's a cost to the farm. And taking into consideration too the things they're doing now to better farm the ground. We own a property in Stewart Point. It's borders on a beach, borders on a pond, and basically I want to explain it properly, but the field is here, the pond is here, and there's a slope like that. 15 meters does not allow any runoff. And the same with, there's a cranberry bog in one corner of the field. You can't farm in that cranberry bog because there's a berm around the cranberry bog. So why do you need to increase that another 15 meters? Just doesn't make sense. This is the kind of things I get concerned about when a municipality, I'm going to say Belfast, decides to take it upon themselves to develop their own bylaws. When we had provincial-wide laws that govern all this stuff, the environment, land use, and everything else. What are we trying to accomplish here? Building permits. I heard a comment last meeting. I I agree 100%. I'm against more bureaucracy, but if there's a way of putting a bureaucracy in place which enables proper development quicker in our community, I'm good for it. But if I apply to subdivide a piece of property, a piece of land off a piece of property I have, right now I'm into 6 months. And it's all because it goes through a process and the other departments are consulted. But if we do this ourselves, can somebody tell me this is gonna change? I don't know, I haven't heard that yet.
John, can you answer that?
Well, I have some feedback on a lot of things. I don't know if you want. Are you done, Robert? Or
Yeah, for that part.
Okay.
My main question is, if community rural development or Belfast municipality decides to enact this, put this in place, does that mean, like, if I wanted to put an application in to subdivide a piece off my property, then there's a set timeline for how things can happen in terms of approvals, and that makes it quicker. Like right now, you hand in the form and it's gone into Never Land. Nobody calls you back. You really have to call up, and then now is the point. I'm not hard to get along with. I just want to know what's going on. Now is the point. This is Robert calling me, and I don't need to talk to him. And that's why I'm thinking, like, my question is, if you enact this, will it make it easier to get simple little things like this done?
Okay, I'll answer that first. I did want to talk about the buffers too, but I'll talk about that first. So first of all, you kind of mentioned one of the points there about trying to reach people. One of the first benefits is accessibility. You're going to have someone in your office with a set schedule who you can reach, probably more efficiently. Now, I'm not here to be bad-mouthing the province themselves, but can you promise that things will be faster? My answer is it depends. Because at the council meeting, there are things I've done in an hour, and there are things I've done in months, because there's a reason for some things. Now, you might not know the reasons, they might not be very transparent, and again, the answer might be because they're just slow, and they're not being customer friendly. But, if there are concerns like environmental, like setbacks, those things need to be considered and they can take time. Putting strict timelines on things, as I mentioned in my report, is a bad idea because you don't know what's going to come up. And if people are yelling at you saying you broke your timeline because you haven't investigated thoroughly, well, you're going to have problems all the time. So that is one reason why none of these municipalities or the province, promises a specific time frame for stuff. But my answer is, will it be efficient? Well, for most cases, I would assume, again, it hasn't happened yet, but I would assume it'd be more accessible, it'd be more open, it'd be more transparent. Things go to council, things can be talked about at council, and the decision rests either with the development officer, and if they have all that information, they can make the decision quickly, immediately. If, for example, in some bigger projects, there's a list of them in the draft, it has to go to council, and then the community has their say. And that can also take time, because it has to be scheduled, but then the powers rest with the community, and that's a benefit, in my opinion, than resting with someone in Charlottetown. So there are some trade-offs, and can I promise it will always be faster? Absolutely not, no. But will there be benefits to it that increase the transparency and the openness in your community? I would say yes. That's my point to that, essentially. Anyone have any questions on that point, first of all?
I guess when I look at this whole process, I'm looking for pros and cons, and then I try to find a balance. Is it something that should happen now, in the future, or never? I've heard some pros, I've heard some cons. I haven't heard, the biggest con I have is cost. Our community is large, our population base is small. People can't pay more taxes than they have right now. And I have yet to hear a costing in this whole exercise. Maybe I missed it, I don't know. So I've just started to pay attention at the time. But
I can answer that if you would.
yeah, sure.
Okay, so as this process was going forward, I did some preliminary work myself with Eastern Kings about what exactly it costs us to be able to do this. And I was actually, well, there's going to be two answers here, because I was struck with some extra costs that we did not envision at first when we were told about the requirement of doing an official plan and development bylaw. And I had worked out what the costs were, and they were more than what I was expecting. John had answered a question on Wednesday. Did the costs of the filing for a development permit cover these costs? Well, the answer was no. And there was going to definitely be more costs. However, I also found out that the province is working on a bill that would see any municipality with an official plan and development bylaw get extra money so that they could deal with those extra costs. So the answer is, if we were to go ahead without that PEI government guarantee of extra funding, it's definitely going to cost us extra money. And right now I'm still working out the numbers, but it could cost us as much as $50,000 more per year. However, if the government was going to be covering those costs, then it may be costing us nothing. So we're still working with the province to try and get or find out what that funding is. They still have to actually provide it or decide to provide it. So there's still some work to do that way, but there's no question that if we were to implement it today, it would cost the municipality and the taxpayers extra money to be able to do this. So we're still looking at getting the costs of having an official plan and development bylaw approved with funding sources. On October the 16th, we will be, I'll have a report in front of council that will detail as best as we can what the costs might be to a municipality, and also the state at which the province is for providing that funding. So yes, we're definitely looking at that.
Again, until we know, or somebody knows what it's going to cost, what we're going to get out of this, I think it's hard to make a decision. I'll say it again as I did last Wednesday night. We had a great system before, as I was involved with CIC. The building permits once a month. If the building permits going on in Belfast, the council will look at comments, yay, nay, or good to go. Very simple. Costs nothing. If people in town does that, and every building permit that's issued from PEI is governed by a set of regulations, provincial-wide or citywide. Now, environmental rules are province-wide. I struggle with creating bureaucracy just to take somebody else's work. That's part of the problem I have with this whole process right now.
And I'll, just for the benefit of the people on Facebook or tuning in Facebook, I'll let them know the answer that we had. Garth and I and a few others met with the province because we had asked them exactly that. We basically wanted to say, can't you just tell us what you're planning? We'll give you our opinion, and then just like they used to do with CIC. And they said no. With the Municipal Government Act that's enacted now, we no longer have that ability. Well, they said, for example, even if we had our own community plan and we gave our community plan to the province, like if we didn't want to take on all those responsibilities, we just had a vision for our community, would they look at it when they were making development decisions? And they said no. They don't have the ability or authority to look at our comments or even ask us our opinion. That's what. So we wanted to do the old system, the CIC system, but we weren't allowed. That's no longer available to us.
Bob, during the old CIC system, again, they're presented to council, but you actually had no power to approve or deny.
We could only
It's just
provide
for
opinion.
information purposes.
That's
Did they
right.
ever listen to the no's, Robert? that you're aware of?
There was never any controversy that I know of.
Okay.
But again, if the community was forewarned ahead of time, this is something that's going to be approved, then you have a chance.
But you still don't have power.
Right.
You're never gonna have
Opinion
power
only.
under the current
Power
legislation,
comes-
unless you have a plan.
Power comes in many ways. You have the absolute power to say, no, we don't want this, or you have public opinion power. That's the way it works.
That's been working out sometimes for places that don't have official plans,
Yeah.
sometimes.
Like,
It's still up to the province.
yeah, it's still up to the province because they're the ones that manage the rules and regulations around building permits, environmental laws, all that stuff. I have to wonder if it's not worthwhile, this council spending a little bit of time in working with MLAs in the local area. I don't care who it is, whether it's red, blue, purple, I don't care. Lobbying government, make that change, because it doesn't make sense to set up another bureaucracy to do exactly the same thing that's going on in Carrollton today. I just want to see it.
Well, I can tell you after working with government and within government for a number of times on some of these issues, that, Bob, you guys were talking to the wrong people. If you're talking into the bureaucracy, all you're gonna get is bureaucratic answers. Because the bureaucracy's first, duty is to itself, to preserve it and to preserve its own power. You have to talk to the politicians. I've had different instances where there's been difficult issues that have come up, and it's all it's taken is one call to a minister, that when I had access to them, to completely solve everything. And within an hour, I'd get a call back to a certain department and say, oh yeah, well, I think we're changing our mind on that. You have to talk to the politicians. That's how it works on Prince Edward Island. It's that simple.
And it does not only work in Prince Edward Island, we heard that happen in Nova Scotia yesterday or the day before. They changed their mind, just looked back because somebody talked to somebody in power and said,
That's all
no,
it takes.
we need to change that.
Is access to power your solution?
Sorry?
Is access to power your solution?
Sorry?
Is accessing power your solution to the problems?
Yeah. To duplicate, to stop duplicating processes and bureaucracies.
Okay.
Like, I hate this silo building exercise that goes on all over the place. I think it's a waste of money, and it's time to, because we are a large community, but our population is small. But I just don't see it. Sorry.
Bob, I remember a conversation that we had probably around budgeting time, where there was a theoretical ability of council to take some of the funding that we dispense to the community and use it for our own council purposes. Do you remember something like that?
Yes, so as a council, when it comes to budgeting, you were specifically at that time talking about the community grants and reallocating them to something else. So I'll just give an example. If we end up giving $195,000 away in community grants normally, because we give so much to the fire hall, were you allowed, or can council decide, okay, we're going to give 150 in community grants and 45 will go toward the operations of a development officer or official plan? Yes, absolutely. That is a council prerogative if that's what they want to do.
Yeah, I'm not saying that that's necessarily
No,
a solution, but
that is an
definitely,
option
if
for
there's
you.
people in the community who are maybe not opposed to or in favor of having a plan and bylaws, but rightfully concerned about the cost, I think that that's, potentially there might be some people in the community who say, you know what, I would rather see $50,000 less dispersed to the community groups if that means that we have the bylaws in place and a cost-neutral way of enforcing them.
That is an option.
It may be an option, but I caution very strongly. When Belfast CIC was in operation years ago, there was two main focuses for the budget: the fire department and community organizations. And I can tell you, if we don't have a viable fire department in this community, we're in for a serious problem. I guarantee you. Those people down there, they deserve more than what they're getting. And if we're talking cutbacks to fund something like this, I really think you're putting the cart before the horse when you're telling me that there there's talks underway to provide municipalities with funds. I would rather have the funds in place first and then do your plan. Because I would, again, I strongly caution anybody to think about cutting back on the rink, the Rhode Island Development Corporation. These people work hard, volunteers, and we can't give them enough. We can only give them so much, especially the fire department. That's an organization that deserves more than what they're getting. So that's all I can say about that.
Any other questions for Robert?
I could just briefly address the first point, the setbacks, the buffers. Talking about that just briefly. So yes, 15 meters is the provincial minimum. There's been talk, and it's in this proposed draft, to maybe increase it to maybe 30 meters. That primarily stands with development, not necessarily agriculture. So if you're trying to build a house or a building, that's more where it's in play. Obviously, there are agricultural buffers that exist, but in the context of municipalities, typically buffers are more into actual developments than they are to agriculture. And one of my recommendations in my report was essentially, when it comes to buffers, being more nuanced than saying, you know, it's 15 meters or it's 30 meters. I'm from a municipality where it's actually, the buffers vary quite a bit depending on the body of water, depending on if it's shoreline versus a stream versus a swamp. So if there's concerns about, you know, is a buffer good or bad, I mean, it's one of those things, as I said, you know, if you are going forward with the process, you talk about that and you have the right and the power to be more nuanced with that. So that's all I'll say. You know, it can be changed.
Yeah. I was more concerned about around the rivers and streams, wetlands. Like, I believe in our area, there may be some circumstances that I'm not aware of, but I believe in our area, the 15-meter buffer zone works very well. I've seen other areas inside a community, the water runs red every time it rains, and that's good. It's got a little bit to do with agriculture. It's got a lot to do with highways. I think the highways and the ditching system is a bigger play on siltation and erosion than people realize.
Can I comment to that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sherry.
And see it, sun in the face.
No, I totally understand where you're coming from. And we don't want to see any less buffers for sure. And yes, we do have some riverbeds. Some of that's legacy sediment. We have erosion in our riparian zones. We do have some issues with agriculture. We do work with farmers now to mitigate that, and most of them are great to work with. We have many different funding options to help through those things. And there are tools out there to develop buffer zones for sensitive areas and or to appropriate areas. The tools, I think it's from the Department of Agriculture, they have a tool that you can use based on slope. You know, so those are all things that we think are tools that could be used. What we were recommending is based on the science that we've found so far. But yeah, we want to work with people. We don't want to take anybody's land away. I mean, the government does have some programs in place for buffer zone buybacks and things. Coastal areas may be something to look at differently with sea level rise, extreme storms, all those things. But yeah, so we, as BOG, appreciate your comments, and we do our best to work with all the landowners along any of these water courses and things, and we're open to using whatever tools we need to protect our environment.
No, I hear you. It's just, I've got a fair amount of history on this whole thing, where it started from. Years ago, we were a crowd group that got problems to initiate ALICE, Altered Land Use, something, I forget what it stands for. And what it did is, if you were a farmer, you could identify zones, high slopes, whatever, taking into production, you were paid so much
Yes.
every year. They enacted the 15-meter buffer zone, and then you know what happened then? They said that's something you have to do by law, so we're not paying for that anymore. And these are the kinds of things you're gonna run into when you start to talk about increasing buffer zones. But people are not gonna put up with that at all. So, anyways.
It's an important reality, those unintended consequences of what seems to be on the surface and probably done with good intentions. But at the end of the day, it does as much damage as it, anyway, it just does a lot of things that you don't expect it to happen. But in my concern, the number one issue with me is, well, there's a number of them, but one of them is, do we want to assume the responsibility for administering what is essentially provincial legislation? And that's what it comes down to. If you look at the Fortan report, if you look at what's happening in any municipalities, essentially that's what they're doing, because we have to follow the provincial laws and the provincial acts, the Provincial Planning Act, the Environmental Protection Act. There's a whole range of them. And I know for myself that you're going to have to do a lot of convincing of me to get me to be involved with the introduction of anything that is beyond what's already contained in provincial legislation.
Can I stop you there, Jim? We only have one more public person to go through, and then we're going to go through all of the council members to get their comments. Is that okay?
No, I don't care.
I just have one clarification.
For Robert?
Not so much for Robert, just for Charlie. I just want it to be clear, just because, you know, people here and listening online might construe it that you were suggesting that we take money from the fire department. Because that was just some of the discussion. No, but that's why I just wanted to clarify that, like, that was not, at least that's what I assumed, was not the intention, that it was just that there are some different avenues that we can discuss for funding without raising taxes.
Yes, it was made clear before that council had the option to look at all of the line items in our budget. That's, community grants is just one of the line items. And basically council has the ability to look at all of the line items that we have in our budget to suggest changes in order to be able to pay for this official plan and development bylaw service.
Yep, I just want to make sure that was
Okay.
clear.
Thank you.
Bob, can I say one more thing before I go to the washroom? Just in regards to what the councillor said. It does not become our responsibility to enforce provincial legislation. If someone's violating provincial legislation, even if we have planning authority, it's still, the province can still go after them. It's just if we want a plan and bylaw that goes further than provincial legislation, which is the point of having your own official plan and bylaw to begin with. So, like I said in the last council meeting, I can't convince you of the moral goodness.
I didn't get to that point.
Okay, the moral goodness of having an official plan or bylaw, that's not my point to be here. It's just, you know, if you want to have an official plan and bylaw which gives you as a municipality your own control over what goes on, that's the point of it.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Janet, did you have anything to add, Janet? No? We do have one other member of the public. Would you like to speak? Yeah.
Okay, I'm
If so, please come up to the microphone so we can hear you. You could just say your name for the record.
Okay, Diane Baker, Annette. And I wasn't really planning to come here to speak, but just to listen anyway. That's just to try to find out what's going on. And I guess from what I understand, the authority is to be taken away from access to a group in Belfast. Is that my understanding?
If council and then subsequently the government of Prince Edward Island adopt an official plan and development bylaw, then the council would have the ability for development approval only. We're not talking about everything that Access PEI does, like we don't do building permits and mechanical permits and all that kind of stuff. We just do the develop the overall development permit. And then we would also have to ensure that we enforce whatever happens in an official plan and development bylaw. But after that, it goes back to the responsibility of the province.
Okay, so it's just the development, so this group would not be approving building permits, for instance? Okay, but that would still be
Yeah,
done.
So if
Development
somebody,
permits
if
are
somebody,
building permits.
what's that?
Development permits are building.
Oh,
Oh, okay, it was
Maybe you
my
can clarify
understanding
that,
it was two different.
yeah.
Development permits cover a wide range of things.
Okay,
So we would be issuing our own permits, yes. That's what, I say we, but I'm not here, I'm not from here. So if it were to happen, yes, so development permits cover a wide range of things, and it does give some definitions in the drafts that Boton did. But yes, for example, a house, you would be doing a permit for a house, yes.
And it would be under RMB to approve
Yes, and then
subdivisions?
subdivision as well, it's a subdivision, it has it in the document, subdivision and development.
Yes, but you're not, the municipality is not, they give the development permit for the house,
Mhm.
but then they're not going into a house, checking the wiring for mechanical or the plumbing or,
No, so the province is the one that oversees the building inspections.
right,
So that's a key point, because they're the ones that are enforcing the building code. What we would be simply doing is making sure that what is being constructed matches up with what they applied for.
okay.
So for following the building code, you would rely on the provincial team of inspectors. I recently learned that some municipalities actually do have their own building inspectors, but it's by no means required.
Okay, for instance, if a development permit was approved, does that necessarily mean that then do they go on for another building permit after that?
So
They're one and the same, are they not?
they're one and the same, yes. So basically, what the province would look for in that case is simply that you were approved. And,
Okay.
and in many cases, they'd ask you for a number, like the permit number, which they'd all have a unique number. This is how it works. And yes, but the province still monitors buildings, constructions, and they still, inspect. So,
Okay, in an instance that, the property was put in for a development permit and, probably not by the people do not have ownership of the property, would they be approved for that now, or
so
in that
it
instance?
can be construed a bunch of different ways, but typically how it works is that if someone's applying for something on a property they don't own, the owner's permission is required.
Okay.
Like for my own municipality, which is Eastern Kings, there's a spot for property owner signature, applicant signature, if they're different. So the answer is yes, people can get permits for properties they don't own, but they need the owner's permission.
Okay, that's all I wanted to clarify then. Great, thank
thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.
I have a little quick thing to insert in that too, only because I've seen them done. If you had, say, a pre-built home or a mini home, and you were moving that to a location, that's a development permit, because you're not building it on that spot. If you're building a house from scratch, or you're building an area, then you need a building permit. But there's also an option you can check for building and development.
Yep.
So,
The forms or the documents can be written in many different ways, but that is a good example of a development that isn't a building permit, for example.
you're moving a structure
But,
onto it, you don't need to build it, you're just developing that property. So that's a development permit.
Most municipalities
Yeah.
would still call the permit the same thing, and it would still be the same form, maybe different boxes,
Thank you very much. So we're now moving into the last phase where council gets a chance to make their comments. We have half an hour left, so that actually leaves everybody 5 minutes. So try and make sure each other has time to say their piece. So Jim had his hand up first, so we'll start at that end and work our way around, and Garth can finish us off. Jim, please.
Okay, well, it's certainly not a done deal whether we're going to end up with an official plan of any kind, like I sort of previously was getting to. But as far as I'm concerned, when I look at the Potan presentation, all I see really is a copy and paste from existing provincial legislation. There's a few very minor changes to it. And I would say that we need to be very, very careful to be getting involved with anything where we are starting to make bylaws that is beyond what is already required by the province. And it's for that reason that I mentioned earlier, there could be unintended consequences. And the provincial legislation that's in place, it didn't just happen overnight. It was studied for years and years, each one of those pieces. And it was considered very, very carefully before anything was put in there. And we don't really have the resources or the time to be developing a whole lot of new bylaws, because all we can do is restrict and beyond what is already there. And the biggest issue that I have with the whole thing is with the process that's involved, is that it takes far too long. As far as I'm concerned, the bureaucracy that's in place has sort of forgotten what the definition of a civil servant is, that they're there to serve the public and not to serve themselves. And too often that's the case. Government is getting to be, it's becoming an environment of meters. That means that all they want to do is spend most of their time meeting as opposed to actually doing something. And that's very much the case, and it's the truth. That's the way that it goes. There's no reason in this world why it would take 6 months to a year to get a simple building permit issued. I know that one of the other councillors was telling me that they waited for 6 months to build a bloody little barn. We've got instances in the municipality right now, because I've spoken to some of the builders, where they're stalled for months and months and months over very, very simple little things, because things are floating around one desk to another. It's time happens to be money. And because there's no dog in the fight for within the building process from a lot of these people. You go on holiday for a month. Well, the builder, he's stuck with a timeline he's trying to hit. He's got payroll to meet. He's trying to get things done. He's constantly being asked for more and more information. And it's really unnecessary a lot of the times, I think. So my biggest issue is with the process. Whether we move, the only reason that I would ever think about moving ahead with an official plan of any kind would be to make Belfast an easier place for people to actually come to live and develop the properties. And we have to really pay attention to the fact that people, we can't, you have to be very careful about restricting what people can do on their own properties. Because it's simply not, it's simply not right. So I'm not a fan of the bureaucratic processes in place right now. I know myself, we did a piece of property where I actually completely built a bloody house before we even had a permit issued, because I was simply not prepared to sit around and wait for a bloody year, which is what it took before all of a sudden the thing of the piece of paper arrived. And every time I call, oh, we don't really seem to have a record of that. Well, yeah, they do have a record because I filled it out many times, and it got lost between one department to another department to another department. So the process is rotten. The existing process is rotten. I'm going to take some convincing.
Thank you, Jim. Billy?
Well, main comment, I guess, would be that we need a little bit more polishing on it to make everything, there's some gaps between things in it, and some things need a little bit more clerical sense. But for the most part, it's getting there. In regards to the buffer zones, I will say, being that I've probably covered more of the rivers in this community than anybody at this point, walking the length of them. There are a lot of spots where our buffer zones don't cover it, mainly because of the way our topography is with the steep slopes. 45 feet, it's not exactly enough in all zones. And now whether some spots need to be looked at individually and kind of pick from there, but there are certainly spots where the buffer zones could be improved. And a lot of times it's that you have your 45 feet on a slope where it's almost 80 degrees. So although that distance is within the legal grounds, you're actually only 15 feet and it's coming down at a quicker run. So there are a lot of spots where I've come across extreme runoff and red events. So it's something that needs to be looked at to some extent, for sure. Yeah.
That's it. Thank you, Billy.
Do we still have Fotan on the phone?
Yes.
Okay.
Jamie, you're still there, right?
Yes, we're here.
Okay.
We're listening.
Yep.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you for speaking loudly.
Okay. I'm gonna move closer to the phone. I just have one very specific question for you guys. So on page 13 of the official plan, it discusses who was engaged for the official plan document. I ran this by Bob a couple of months ago, and I didn't really get an answer. So I'm asking you, which Indigenous organizations were engaged through the process?
Yeah, great question, thank you. There were actually two. If you just give me a minute to check my files, I can get that information for you. Just one moment. And maybe while Jamie's doing that, there is a background document that accompanied the development bylaw and official plan called the Issues and Options Report. It kind of provides obviously the background information you're looking for, what groups, what stakeholders we engaged throughout the process. I don't know, Jamie, if you've found the information quite yet, but I think that Issues and Options Report may have previously been posted on the RMB website, but I'm not sure, Bob, if it has or it's still there.
Right, it was on there previously, but I don't think it made it on the website on the two new drafts that you provided.
Bob, can you just
Yeah,
repeat the name?
so I'll just jump in here. There were two, recalling that we were doing multiple plans of this nature on the island at the same time, so we actually consolidated our engagement with these groups directly. So the two would have been Native Council of Prince Edward Island, and I am going to try to pronounce Linui.
Yeah,
I always get that wrong. I try to say it, but yes, we spoke with both of them, and their concerns, admittedly, they're engaging much more closely with the province and the federal government, less so with municipalities, and that's not a slight against Belfast. That's just simply their organizations are oriented more towards higher orders of government. But they did give us some general feedback about needs for particularly new housing was the main priority. In some other communities that we worked in, there were actual specific sites that they were at times interested in having some additional protections for, but those sites were not located in Belfast.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that because, I think it's really important that as we move forward with reconciliation, we're not just doing lip service and we're actually engaging with these groups. So thank you for clarifying that.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for the question.
Is that it for you, Kat?
Yeah.
Okay, Charlie.
Specifically on the documents, I agree, Billy, that we're probably, we're moving along and they're evolving and they're getting more polished and cohesive, so that's a good thing. And I think that we're still at a point where a decision needs to be made about if and how and when these will be implemented. So looking forward to getting more ideas around costing and maybe even hearing more from the community about what they want.
I think that's the shortest speech you gave, Charlie.
Both of us.
Something in the water.
I'm not gonna be much longer, don't worry.
I am gonna.
If I remember correctly, our meeting was September 12th of 2022. So we've come a long way since then. We have a lot of input, but just what they reiterated, both of them, that we still need some space ahead of us. This is nowhere near finished. And we got some great input from people who know this community. And I think that's essential as well. People that know this community and have lived here and what they see for the future as well. And that we maintain our freedoms of our properties. Myself as having a farm and having a swimming pool and all those things, but at the same time protecting our properties. We need to have a balance for what we want ourselves, but what's surrounding us as well. So we need to find what that looks like. Keeping freedoms, but also protecting our freedoms as well. And I'd like to see this continue and work, but we're nowhere near ready to implement this. Yes, it's needed, but we need to make sure we do this right. That's kind of where I'm at right now.
Thank you very much, Lynn. And last word to Garth.
I'm going to take this opportunity to thank you all for coming. And it was well informative. I'm with Lynn on that. We've got a lot of groundwork done, but there's a lot more to be done. And we're not going to rush it. Do it properly. And that's all.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I would like to also thank everyone for coming. I specifically want to thank Town Planning Inc., Matt and Jamie, for being on the line with us today. And I'd like to thank John Ployer for coming out to be able to give his input on the rural aspect. And I particularly want to thank the members of the public that showed up and the members of council that were here to hear those opinions and give their own as well. So, as Garth mentioned, we have come a long way. It's been many years in the making. There's still lots to do, and the next point for council to consider is that on October the 16th council meeting, the council will be taking a look at a few options, whether to accept the 2 draft documents and send it to the province for acceptance, or accept the 2 documents with some edits and changes and send it to the province for acceptance, or accept the 2 draft documents for information only at this point and work with the province on changes, additions for municipalities around official plans and development bylaws, or something else, whatever comes up. So depending on which option is selected, the plan for an implementation date with completed budgeting and costing will also be up in the air, and that will be something for a future discussion. So everyone is invited to the October 16 council meeting, where we will also post it on the website with the agenda. There will be a small report attached to the official plan and development bylaw issue on the agenda, and we'll see where it goes from there. So thank you everybody again for showing up. Thanks to the folks on Facebook who tuned in. Thank you very much to Ashley, who kept all those Facebook folks informed. And thank you everybody for coming, and we'll close